Hey, welcome everybody. We've got a good list of people showing up. We appreciate you coming along. I'm going to kick us off by just introducing myself. I'm Tom, the product marketing manager for the Corona products. And Nate will be doing the presentation. He'll be along in just a minute after I tell you how it's all going to work today. So we're going to go through the major features included in Chaos Corona 8. Even though we're covering just the major features, it's such a huge release with so many major features, it's still going to be quite a long presentation. So make sure you're sitting comfortably and you've got a cup of your favorite beverage. We'll be doing both Max and C4D. We'll be presenting them pretty quick in succession, so no matter which application you use, you won't find yourself sat waiting for something relevant to come along. Please feel free to, let's say I'm muted. Somebody has sound trouble. Oh no. Hopefully everybody else can hear me nice and clear. Yeah, feel free to post your questions as the presentation goes. What will happen is at the 45-minute mark, which is about halfway, we'll stop for 10 or 15 minutes. And I'll answer your questions. I'll pop back on. We'll give Nate a bit of a chance to have a break, have a glass of water, because he's been talking for so long. But you can post those questions anytime. You don't need to wait till the Q&A comes up. I'll have a list of them, and I will go through and answer them to the best of my ability. Then we'll have the second half, and there'll be another Q&A at the end. And again, just keep putting those questions in, and we're happy to answer them. And I think that covers everything. By the way, you're getting to see us this time. Last time we presented, you didn't get to see us at all, and we got some feedback that you'd rather see our faces. So you only have yourselves to blame. And with that, over to you, Nate.
All right. Thank you for that lovely intro, Tom, and a big hello from my side as well. My name is Nate, and I'm a 3D artist / one of the tutorial guys here at Chaos Check. If you've watched our YouTube tutorials or have been there for the Release 7 webinar, then we're probably already acquainted. Anyhow, thank you for tuning in. We're all super excited to have you here, and we can't wait to start unraveling the mysteries of the Corona 8 release. As Tom said, there's a ton to talk about. There's so many new, awesome features. So let's just get this party started, shall we? All right, okay. So Release 8 is a big workflow-focused release. Our developers have been extremely hard at work at developing new features that will make your life easier. We're talking features that we think pretty much everyone will want to use because they're that impactful, really. So no matter the industry you're servicing, we think this release will have a positive impact on your workflow. We really do. Now, for this webinar, we won't really try and spoil things for you with the first slide here, and instead we're just going to go through all of the big new features one by one, starting with Chaos Cosmos. So with Release 8, we're integrating even more of that Chaos ecosystem into our offer, and part of that is the really awesome and super useful Chaos Cosmos functionality. So what is Chaos Cosmos? Well, it's a growing library of really useful, high-quality assets you can put in your renders. And the process of downloading and importing Cosmos assets is designed to be straightforward and easy to use. On the right-hand side here, you can see some of the 3D models that you have available to you right now if you install Release 8. And what you see here is just a fraction of the 3D models you can import into your own scenes. There's different categories of 3D models. So you've got cars, people, beds, tables, cabinets, and a ton more, as you can see. And it's not just 3D models that are available to you through Chaos Cosmos. It's also a ton of materials you have at your disposal. They vary by categories as well, and you've got materials such as wooden floorings, different kinds of woods, fabrics, tiles, stones, and so on and so forth. Again, what you see here on the right side is just a fraction of the materials available. And the materials you can download from Chaos Cosmos, it's important to note that they import into your scenes like your standard Corona materials. So you can import a material you like Okay, you get it from Chaos Cosmos, and then you have that full control over its properties. You can tweak just about anything and everything, just like you would with the materials that you're authoring yourself. Okay, and that's not it. There's more. There's also HDRIs that you can download and import from Chaos Cosmos. So just like that, you now have access to a bunch of different HDRIs that you can use to light your scenes. You've got daytime HDRIs, sunset HDRIs, evening HDRIs, and even some studio ones. So there's plenty to choose from, and you can really just play around by importing them and seeing what fits best into your scene. Now, here's a couple of rendered examples of a scene we've used, where we've used different kinds of 3D models and materials that are available to you in Chaos Cosmos. So, as you can probably guess, with such a nice high-quality library, it gets a lot easier to prop up your scenes, right? Now, how does one work with Chaos Cosmos? Well, let's take a look. We're going to start in the 3ds Max DCC first here. And the workflow is going to be pretty straightforward, as you'll see. So to start up or to open up Chaos Cosmos, well, all you have to do is you just need to click the Open Cosmos browser, and you'll have the Cosmos browser in front of you. And this is going to be sort of your central hub for anything Cosmos related. Okay, and with Cosmos, you have, the types of assets that we talked about. You have 3D models available to you, you have materials, and then you have HDRIs available to you as well, right? So you have access to all of this stuff as soon as you download Release 8. And if you're a Cinema 4D user, well, guess what? The workflow is pretty much exactly the same. It's just a different UI. So you just go under the Corona menu, you bring up the Chaos Cosmos browser. Now in C4D, the Chaos Cosmos browser is going to come up in your default web browser, but other than that, it's going to be exactly the same as the 3ds Max one. So you'll have access to all of the same assets. So you're going to have access to 3D models, materials, and HDRIs as well. Now, with the Chaos Cosmos sort of hub or the Chaos Cosmos browser in front of us, how about we start importing some stuff? And we have a nice little scene here. And what if we wanted to import a nice wooden floor material? Well, then we would go under the materials category. As you can see, you have a ton of subcategories available there as well, and the list keeps growing. But we're interested in wooden flooring, so we're going to go under the wooden flooring category. And then, as you can see, again, you have a ton of wooden floors here that you can choose from. And if you see the asset you like, the material you like, you can just click on the little thumbnail here. It's going to open up a bigger preview for you. As you can see, you can also switch to a different preview. You can open up the additional info tab where you can see the asset's texture resolution, the texture dimensions, and its asset size if that's important to you. But ultimately, if you like the asset, you can just hit the big old download button right here, or alternatively, you can just click the download button on the thumbnail here. And then the download process is going to start. It does depend on your internet speed, but once it's done, you can just hit the import button right there. Now, before we do that, we're actually going to select our floor here in our little scene. And then we're going to hit import. And as soon as we do that, well, look at that. How cool is that? That asset got imported and it's looking fine and dandy and great. And we've imported the material just like that. And if you're a Cinema 4D user, well, we're going to say this again. The workflow is pretty much the same. So we're going to go under the materials category. You have the same exact subcategories available for you to use here as well. We're going to go under the wooden flooring category because we're hunting for that wooden floor. And as soon as you see the one you like, so we're going to use the same asset we've already downloaded in the 3ds Max version. So it's just ready to be imported in Cinema 4D here as well. And as you can see, it imports as a regular Corona material. You just apply it to your object. In our case, this is going to be the floor. And look at that. It's that easy. It's that simple. All right. Now, these are standard Corona materials. So if you bring up the node material editor and you kind of open this material up that we just imported from Cosmos, you can see that this really is just, a preset Corona material. So you can edit all its properties, all of its parameters. You can tweak just about anything and everything when it comes to it. You can tweak it just as you would tweak a material that you authored yourself. So that's really important to know because that's really useful. All right, then we showcased how you can import materials. How about we import some 3D models? We're going to go under the furniture category, subcategory chairs, and we have a bunch of chairs available. We're just going to import this cool looking chair here. And then let's import a lighting fixture as well, shall we? So we're going to take this lamp table here, which is going to hit import. And look at that. It's all imported. And it comes into Cinema 4D as Corona proxies. You have all of the materials available. They're all at your disposal. You can tweak them as you wish, right? And so at this point, pretty much all you probably want to do is you just want to prop your assets into position and, you know, just prop up your scene. You're going to see that the viewport representation, the visualization method, by default, it's set to wire bounding box. You can set it to full mesh. You get a full viewport preview. But again, at this point, it's all about being creative. So yeah, you import these assets, you play around with them, you rotate them, and you just make your scenes look good and better than the one we have in front of us here. Now, if you're a 3ds Max user, let's demo everything we just demoed in C4D demo. So let's sample the floor material here. Let's bring it into our Slate material editor. And as you can see, you know, it's a perfectly editable Corona physical material. All right, so you can tweak anything and everything just like you would with the materials that you authored yourself. Okay? Okay, all right. So how about we demo importing some 3D models as well? So we're going to bring up Chaos Cosmos. We're going to go under the 3D models category. Let's go under furniture. And then let's go under the chairs subcategory. And again, you know, you have a ton of chairs that you can choose from. The list keeps growing. But what we're going to do here is just to prove there's feature parity. We're going to import this chair model that we imported in the C4D demo. So we're just going to bring it into our scene just like that. You know, it's in there and we can move it anywhere we want to. We can rotate it. You know, we can just prop our scene at this point. Now, the asset, same as in Cinema 4D here, comes in as a Corona proxy asset. So there's that to note, right? And now, again, just to drive the point home, you know, Chaos Cosmos is pretty great. So importing stuff is easy, and it should be all about, you know, giving you that creative control. So let's import a lighting fixture here as well. And how about we import the same lighting fixture we imported in C4D, in the Cinema 4D demo. So we're just going to bring it in and look at that. You know, it's, again, it's supposed to be that easy, that straightforward. All right. But with Chaos Cosmos, there's still more to talk about. This is a fully flashed out browser, okay, no matter the application you're dealing with. So you have, for example, extra functionality, like you can only browse the downloaded assets, so assets that you've already previously downloaded. So at this point, you can just import them into your scene, right? Then you have also additional functionality like this little like button here. If you like an asset, it's going to appear in your likes menu or likes category, however you want to put it. And so this way you can kind of customize, well, or make life even easier when working with Chaos Cosmos. Then you also have the filters menu. Now this one is really powerful. It's really powerful because you can choose based on color, based on space, based on surface, or you can sort things by the date they're being added or how popular the assets are. So like, there's a lot that you can do with Chaos Cosmos. It's designed to be friendly to use. It's got a ton of functionality. So it's not just this sort of library where you just import a couple of assets and you're done. No, you can really go to town here. Okay. Now, as additional note, okay, if you browse 3D models, you're going to see that you have this presets section here. Now this section will contain Chaos Scatter presets. That's a pretty important thing. And in the future, we also hope to include Corona decal presets. Okay. Okay. Now, that's kind of like, it should have been a bit of a segue into the next feature that we're gonna talk about here, and that is Chaos Scatter. So what is Chaos Scatter? Well, Chaos Scatter is an incredibly powerful scattering system that you now have access to with the Corona 8 release. 3ds Max users, you've previously had access to, if you remember, to the Corona scatter. And for you, what's important to know about Chaos Scatter is that it's an even better, more featureful scatter than Corona scatter ever was. If you're a Cinema 4D user, well, we've always had Cinema 4D's cloner that was able to do much, sometimes even more than what Corona Scatter was able to do in 3ds Max. But because Chaos Scatter is much more versatile, much more powerful, we've implemented it for Cinema 4D as well. So yes, you do have access to this powerful scattering system that we call Chaos Scatter. Now let's take a look at some of the images that were created with Chaos Scatter. So this is a pretty big one. As you can see, you can scatter a ton of high poly assets, and so you can create landscapes such as the one you see in front of you. Now, Chaos Scatter has got some really nice functionality built in. If you take a look at those mountains in the background and how the trees grow on them, you can see that as the slope gets steeper, the less trees you'll see instanced there. And that's really easy to set up with Chaos Scatter because it's just a matter of tweaking the slope parameter, so just a single parameter essentially. Here's another really cool image our coworker George made. Props to you, George. It's a rendered image of a swamp, as you can see. Everything you see scattered here was scattered with the help of Chaos Scatter. For this one, George used the incredibly underrated frequency functionality that's there in this new scattering system. So he was able to control how a certain 3D asset appears, or how often a certain 3D asset appears in a given scatter. And that's really useful stuff. Then here's another one of his images. So one of the things you can observe here is that the pillars on the sides there are traveling alongside a certain path. And that path was defined with a simple spline. And Chaos Scatter just used that spline as a path along which it scattered the pillar instances. This next slide might appeal to our abstract creatives. So you can do wild scatters such as the one here, and the little holes you see where nothing got scattered, well, a simple spline, a simple closed spline was used to define the area where nothing gets scattered there. So that's really useful functionality for defining the areas where you want or don't want to do any scattering. Now, last but not least, if you've been there for the Release 7 webinar, you'll remember this city scene. What we didn't tell you at the time was that the entire city was made with Chaos Scatter. So all the buildings are basically just a couple of 3D assets being scattered all over the place. Now, don't be mad at us. At the time, we were still developing Chaos Scatter, so we just didn't want to spoil anything in case, you know, some functionality that we were developing might not work as we wanted it to, or we needed more time. But now, ultimately, hopefully you're at least a little bit hyped up about Chaos Scatter right now. So let's jump into our DCCs here, and let's see how Chaos Scatter looks like in action. So we're going to start off in Cinema 4D here. And as you can see, we have this sort of, well, landscape scene going on the left. We have the interactive renderer already running. And what we're going to do here first is we're actually going to scatter some grass onto this pretty barren looking island at the moment. Okay, and to do that, we're going to leverage Chaos Scatter. So if you're a Cinema 4D user, to bring in Chaos Scatter, you just go under the Corona menu and you bring in the Chaos Scatter object. All right, now, what are we going to scatter? Well, we're going to scatter some grass. So we have a couple of grass assets prepared here. They're pretty high poly. And guess what? You have access to them as well because they are available to you right now through Chaos Cosmos. So what we're going to do with these grass assets, we're just going to plug them under or into the Chaos Scatter object, depending on how you like to look at things. So with that done, all we have to do is then we need to go under the object menu and we need to define the distribute on mesh, essentially, which is going to be our island. And just like that, look at that, we have our scatter happening. So we have all of these grass instances being scattered across the entire island. You can see that in the viewport right there. And you can also see it, well, in the interactive renderer. We even have some of those instances highlighted there. But obviously, the island is still kind of barren. So we're going to go under the surface scattering menu here, and we're just going to up the count, and we're going to up the count quite considerably. We're going to create 100,000 instances. And it's going to take just a couple of seconds for everything to reparse. And look at that. Now we have a much more lusher island in front of us. Now, let's talk about some really cool functionality that Chaos Scatter has, which is the camera clipping functionality. So this is really useful because if you take a look at how the instances are being scattered at the moment, you're going to see that they're scattered across the entire island, right? But now, if you were to enable camera clipping here by just toggling the enable button here to on, you're going to see that we're limiting the scattering basically to the field of view of the camera right there, right? So as you can see, the scatter only happens in the field of view of the camera that we have selected here, right? And that can be really useful for whenever you want to, sort of limit your scatters and conserve on your, hardware. Yeah, basically, when you want to conserve on your hardware resources. Now, sometimes you're going to have assets. If, for example, if these grass assets were trees, they would probably cast shadows off from the sides as well. And in that case, you can use the extended view functionality here. So if we just up this to 500 centimeters, you're going to see that we're extending that view, right? And that can be really useful because, again, if these grass assets were actually 3D assets, it would probably throw some shadows onto our main render view here, or they would show up in the reflections, right? So that's when you can use the extended view functionality. Now, if you're a 3ds Max user, let's demo the same workflow. We're going to create a chaos scatter object. What we're going to do is we're going to select our distribute on target, which is going to be our island here. And then obviously we're going to want to instance something, and we're just going to instance those same assets that we've put into a selection set here. So we're using those same field grass assets from Chaos Cosmos here as well. And just like that, we have our scattering going. You can even see it in the interactive viewport here, if you take a closer look. But obviously the count is really low. So let's up that to again, maybe to 100,000 instances. And now there's a lot more of that scattering happening. There's a lot more of those instances in there. If you want to do camera clipping in 3ds Max, you can also do that. You just, enable camera clipping. You make sure that your camera is set to the one you would like, and then you have that scattering only happening in that field of view of that camera. Okay, you want to up the count even further? Let's do that. Let's up it to 1 million. That's a ton of instances. And look at that. Now we have this really lush meadow in front of us. And it was that easy to set up, and the parsing didn't take that long, if you notice. Okay. Now with Chaos Scatter, you also have transformation randomization options, so you can randomize the translation or the position of the instances. You can do the same with rotation. As you can see, we're already randomizing the rotation on the z-axis here a little bit. And then you can also randomize the scale as well. So this is all really useful stuff. Maybe we could tweak the scale here just a little bit. So we're going to go from 95% to 105% of the original scale. So what you're defining here is basically the range. So the instances are going to go from 95% of their original scale to anywhere up to 105%. You're just defining the range here. And that's going to introduce some of that extra randomization. That's, going to make your image all that more realistic. Now, can you do the same stuff in Cinema 4D? Why, yes, absolutely you can. So let's up the count to 1 million. Let's brag with the numbers a little bit. You can go even higher if you want to, but let's go with 1 million here. It's not going to take all that long to reparse. And as you can see, we have this really lush meadow in front of us. Okay. Again, it was that easy and that quick to set up. And Chaos Scatter is sort of optimized to work relatively fast. Now, with Chaos Scatter in Cinema 4D, you also have those transformation randomization options, if you will. So you can randomize the translation, which is another word for position. And you can do the same with rotation and the scale. As you can see, for the rotation, we're also randomizing it already. So we're kind of, making sure that not all of the instances are pointing in the same direction. So we're randomizing them on the y-axis here from 0 to 360 degrees. And again, it's all about that range that you're defining. So from 0 degrees to 360 degrees. And, you can tweak the scale as well. So how about we do the same thing we did in 3ds Max? So we're going to go from 95% to 105%. And that's going to be that scale range. And these instances are going to get scaled sort of accordingly to the range that we've set there. Now, as you can see, this allows for a really intuitive workflow. You do want to get acquainted with some of this functionality, but once you do, it's all supposed to be real easy to use. But now there's there's additional sort of functionality that we want to showcase to you. If we go under the areas menu here, you're going to notice that you have spline includes and spline excludes. So this way you can define areas with splines where you want scattering to happen, or areas where you don't want the scattering to happen. Okay, so in our case here, what if we unhide this road spline? And you're going to see that it's just a spline. It's not really conforming to the surface all that precisely. Okay, it doesn't have to, but it's just a bit of a curvy spline that's going to define where our road's going to go. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to take this road spline and we're going to plug it into the spline exclude list. So we're going to say, hey, chaos scatter, don't scatter stuff near this spline. Okay, now once the interact renderer refreshes, you're going to notice that, well, nothing really happened. But hey, what you need to do is when you're not using closed splines, you want to set the near and far distance for that spline, because this works on a per spline basis. You want to set that near and far distance to kind of create a bit of a, well, area along the spline where things won't get scattered. So for our near distance here, we're going to set this to be set to 100 centimeters. And for the far distance, we're going to set it to be 125 centimeters. The difference between near and far distance is going to make sure that we have a bit of a fall off in the way our instances are going to be scattered. And just by defining that, look at that, we have a nice little road going through this lush meadow that we created. Okay, and that wasn't all that hard to set up. And, you know, just put a spline into the spline exclude and you tweak the near and far distances. Now, can you do the same things in 3ds Max? Well, you sure can. So you just find the areas menu and, you know, we're basically going to do the same thing here in 3ds Max that we did in Cinema 4D. We're just going to take our road spline here. We're going to add it to our spline excludes by selecting it, right? And just like that, once the renderer refreshes, the scene reparses, right? You can see that now we have this nice little road traveling across our meadow, you know? You also can set the near and far distances on a per spline basis in 3ds Max as well. So maybe we could adjust the far distance here to 1 meter and 25 centimeters. And again, that just takes care of that nice little fall off that'll happen between 1 meter and 25 centimeters. Okay. Okay. Now there's another set of really important functionality here, and that is the frequency functionality. So if you go under your instance model object here, you're going to be able to select the asset and adjust its frequency. So by dropping the frequency here, we're essentially saying, hey, scatter, this asset will not appear as often as the other assets. And we're going to do the same for this other grass asset, because these are all those really sort of tall grass assets. Now, if we take a look at the before and afters, here's a bit of an image. Okay, it most certainly could be fine-tuned. We could randomize things, and we could use the random transforms and all that. But let's focus on the frequency. As you can see, there's a lot of that tall grass in there right now. Once we adjust the frequency, well, as you can see, you know, that tall grass is a lot less frequent in there. Okay. Now, if you're a Cinema 4D user, all of what we just showcased holds true for you as well. So if you go under the Objects menu, you got these instance children's here, and as you can see, you have the frequency column here, and you just click on the parameter that you'd like to edit. So we're going to edit the frequency for our Fieldgrass 015 asset. We're just going to make it be a lot less frequent, and we're going to do the same for the Fieldgrass 014 asset. Okay, the end result, well, this was the before shot, okay, with just a lot of that tall grass in there, and this is the after shot. So as you can see, you know, there's still that tall grass in there. It's just a lot less frequent. And personally, I find this, well, functionality really useful, but don't tell that to anybody, please. Okay, so let's explore chaos scatter just a little bit more. As you can see here, we have a bit of a tree scatter happening. It's being spread across the entire island. So we've got these trees instance on the entire island. And what if we wanted to limit them just to this spline, this closed spline here that we created, this tree area spline? So in that case, you would just go under the areas menu, you would go under the spline includes, and you would just add that tree area spline to it. And just like that, as you can see in the viewport already, we're limiting those trees to essentially grow, or if we're more precise, to be instanced just in the confines of that spline. In 3ds Max, you can do the same exact thing. So what we'll do here is we're just gonna find the areas menu, and we're gonna plug something into this spline include list. And what we're gonna plug in there is gonna be this spline right here. It's a closed spline. So anything that's on the inside of this closed spline, is the area we're gonna scatter stuff. And as you can see, that's already happening. Now, we got a ton of trees here, so we might as well lower the count here. And as you can see, this is just how you're typically being creative when working with Chaos Scatter. It's about tweaking things and playing with all the parameters. What you'll notice here is that some of the trees, however, are sort of growing aligned to the normals. And that's not how trees grow in my part of Europe, where I'm located. So how about we go into the transformation menu, rotation, and we find and adjust the normal versus Z parameter. So if we set this one to 1, now you're going to see that all these trees are going to be pointing straight up on the Z axis. And that's typically how trees grow, right? So that parameter is pretty important. Now, obviously, if you are, for that realism, you maybe want to adjust the rotation just a little bit here. You want to add some randomization to it. So maybe we can add 2 degrees, just so the trees kind of, have some randomization to them. Some of them are going to be just a little tilted, right? So you can do all that stuff. We could do the same thing with the translation as well. So we could randomize the translation a little bit. We can do the same with scale, right? So we can set some of these trees to be smaller. Some of them are going to be even bigger than the original, than their original scale, right? So that's all the stuff that you can do. But what you're also going to notice here is that we have some trees intersecting, and that's a no-go because that's not how trees grow, right? And so if we go under the scattering menu up here, we have this avoid collisions button. If we toggle it to on, well then, guess what? None of the instances are going to collide. They're not going to intersect. So that's really useful. You also have the spacing parameter right there to adjust the bounding box for those. If you're a Cinema 4D user, can you adjust the scale of your trees? Well, you absolutely can, as you can see, right? That's really easy to do. But what you're also going to notice here is that these trees are, again, going to be aligned to the normals. So again, that's not how typically trees grow. So how about we tweak that in Cinema 4D as well? So we're just going to go under the rotation submenu here, and we're going to find this normal alignment parameter. And if we set it to 1, now all the trees are going to be pointing straight up. All right, you can clearly see if we set it to 0, they're aligned to the normals. If we set them to 1, they're pointing straight up. That's really important. You do want to add some randomization to the rotation, right? So maybe we could add 5 degrees to the randomization. Okay, on the X and Z axis, but that kind of looks like a little much. So again, it's all about playing around with your scatters, getting that variation in, but at the same time, not overdoing it. All right, cool. So how about we up the tree count here as well? So let's just create 400 instances. Okay, that's a lot of trees. And as you can see now, the trees are gonna intersect. All right, they're gonna collide, if you will. So that's no good, because that's, again, not typically how trees grow. They don't all grow from the same place. So you can go under the config menu here, you hit the avoid collisions button, and look at that. Now the instances are gonna avoid colliding with each other. That's really useful functionality. You can adjust the spacing there, which is going to adjust the bounding boxes. So you can adjust that as well. Now, if you are a 3ds Max user, we do have some additional functionality for you as well. Unfortunately, this does not hold true, or this is not implemented in C4D just yet. We hope to get it implemented soon, but for now, it's available only in 3ds Max. And that is this really powerful, in a way, edit instances functionality. So if you just hit this button right here, well then now you can select any of the instances that you have in front of you, and well, you can move it anywhere you want to. You can scale it however you please, and you can rotate it, and all that's going to happen on a per instance basis. As you can see, we're just tweaking this one instance here, and you can select any of the instances that we have that we're scattering here, and you can adjust them individually if you so want to, which is pretty cool for our direction. Unfortunately, again, we're trying to get this functionality into Cinema 4D as well. Please, stay patient with us there. But in Cinema 4D, let's take a look at the next pretty important functionality that is connected to Chaos Browser here. So if you open up Chaos Browser, if you go under 3D models, if you go under presets, well, you're going to have Chaos Scatter presets here. Okay, we kind of alluded to this earlier, if you remember, in the Chaos Cosmos section. And so you're going to see that some of these assets can be spread, well, can be scattered on a surface. They have this icon that you see there. Others can be, or are designed to be working on a spline. They're designed to be scattered on a spline. Now, we have a spline prepared here. As you can see, it's this sort of tree line that's going across the back of the island here. And this spline is actually conforming to the surface quite perfectly because we needed to do that. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to import this scatter preset of this nice little tree line. And just like that, it's already in our scene. So now all we have to do is we just need to select that tree line that we want to scatter this scatter on, or scatter this scatter preset on. That's a mouthful. And just like that, you're going to notice that we're going to have our nice little tree line happening right there. And so you can use Chaos Cosmos to get scatter presets out of it, because we got scatter presets on there. The same thing holds true for 3ds Max users as well. Bring up Chaos Cosmos browser. You select the the spline that you have. You import the preset, and that preset is going to be it's going to be set up on that spline, okay, directly on that spline. So that is really useful functionality right there, if you ask me. Then we have that famed slope parameter. This is kind of one of my personal favorites as well, if I may say so. So we have this slope limitation set of parameters here. It's actually just 2-3 parameters or so that you can tweak. And if you take a look at the mountains in the background right now, we have no slope limitation essentially enabled, okay? And so if you take a look at the mountains in the background, you're going to see that the trees are sort of evenly growing across all the mountains, right? Well, what if we tweak the slope limitation? Okay, what if we set it to 60 degrees? Well, look at that. No, so now the trees are not going to grow on those really steepy surfaces, right? They're going to be limited to an angle of 60 degrees. You want to limit the angle even further? Let's push it down to 30 degrees. Well, as you can see, that tree line is just gonna grow in those less steeper areas. If you put the angle to 10 degrees, well, then now the trees are just gonna mostly gonna be instanced, or they're gonna grow on those flat areas right there behind that island in the middle that you see there, right? So the slope limitation parameter is really useful, and it's really that easy to use. You just scatter stuff and then you adjust the slope limitation parameters and you're kind of done. Now, 3ds Max users, and unfortunately this is one of those things that we're still working hard on getting into the Cinema 4D implementation, but 3ds Max users, you have access to the Chaos Scatter Surface color. So this basically just means that in the example here, you're going to see that we've applied a texture onto a plane. And now we can use this shader, this Chaos Scatter Surface Color shader, to color the instances. Okay, so as you can see, if we just do a before and after, this is the texture that's being applied to our plane. And then as you can see, all of the instances are going to get colored correctly according to, well, how that texture was set up, right? And that can ultimately, net you these kinds of results. So what you see here is just a ton of instances being scattered on a plane and has a texture applied to it. So this can be really useful for a wide variety of things, that's for sure. And again, this is a bit of we have awesome devs. They're trying really hard, but they need a little bit more time to get this stuff into the Cinema 4D version. But we're working hard on it, and be on the lookout for updates in the future. Okay, so next thing. That was it for Chaos Scatter. It was a bit of a long one, but there's so much that you can do with Chaos Scatter that we just had to take some extra time in explaining it. But the next thing then Corona decal functionality. This is one of the crowd favorites. And what Corona decals do is they make adding decals a breeze. You can add decals such as, for example, the road markings you see on the image on the right here. You can add decals like that to your objects really simply just by pointing a Corona decal to your object. And that's it. You don't have to mess with UV mapping or any kind of that layered material with carefully placed masks ordeal or anything like that. Corona decals truly make adding details like this a ton easier, and we think this is functionality that everyone will end up using one way or another, and it will speed up, well, everyone's workflow a ton. So here's a rendered image that features a couple of Corona decals. Care to guess what the decals are here? Well, if you're thinking it's the bicycle lane marking, then yes, give yourself a pat on the back. That's a +1 for you. The lane markings as well. Yes, those are definitely Corona decals as well. But hey, yo, check this out, people. We're going to switch this slide here to the same image, but without any Corona decals in the scene. Okay, you ready? All right. Now, that's a lot of stuff missing all of a sudden, isn't it? And not just some simple road markings. So as you can see, the potholes that are actually displacement-driven holes, as you can see, they have depth to them. Those are also Corona decals. And then the manhole cover that you see there, that's sticking so nicely out of the asphalt road, well, that's also a Corona decal. So as you can see, Corona decals are more than just some stickers. They can do displacement as well, and so you can use them in so many different ways. And again, you don't need to bother with UV maps and anything like that. It's literally just a couple of clicks to go from the sort of a simple barren-looking scene to this scene that has so much more going on. It truly is an incredible feature, and there's a reason for it being a crowd favorite. So how about we not just talk about it, let's take a look at how it all works. So we're going to start demoing decals in 3ds Max first here. And so the workflow is, well, as always with Corona, it's designed to be pretty straightforward. You just, create a Corona decal, you draw a little gizmo in the viewport, and then what you want to do is you want to create a material for it. So we're going to create a Corona physical material. And what we're going to do next is we're just going to apply it to our decal. Okay, so as you can see right now, it's not looking like much. It's definitely doing something. It's projecting this rectangle there, but that's not exactly what we want. We want to create a road marking here, okay? And the road marking that we're going to want to create, well, it's going to be this bicycle lane marking, okay? And so for that, we're going to use some of the textures that you see here. These are Mangascan assets, by the way. And we've already imported them into our scene here. As you can see, we have all these textures in here. And so let's just plug all of these into our material. So the albedo goes into the base color. The roughness map is going to go into the base roughness slot. We have our Corona normal map here. We're just going to plug it into the base bump slot. Yes. And so now, as you can see in the interact renderer, we're already kind of getting that shape we want. There's some detailing going on, but there's still that rectangle-ish blob happening. And that's not exactly what we want still, right? We don't want that rectangle there. We just want a bicycle lane marking. And to get that going, you also need an opacity map. And it's just a simple opacity map of that bicycle lane marking. We're going to plug it into the opacity color slot. And just like that, look at that. We have our Corona decal in front of us, and it's looking real nice. And if you move it around, the interactive renderer is going to update real quickly, real nicely. You can project it over other surfaces as well. They don't even have to be they don't even have to be the same mesh. You can just project them anywhere you want to. Okay, and decals are that easy to use. If you go under their settings, maybe one important thing that we should mention here is that you have the size functionality here to adjust the aspect ratio of your texture. So if you just hit this fit to assigned material button, then the aspect ratio of the Corona decal is going to adjust to the textures that you're using in your material. So you can make sure that your aspect ratio is, well, the correct one, right? Right. Okay, now Cinema for the users. Boy, you can do exactly the same things we just showcased. So we've already prepared a material here. It's the same exact material that we've created in 3ds Max. We just pre-prepared it just to save some time. As you'll see here, you have that same albedo map, that same roughness map, same normal map, and that same opacity map as well. So what we're still missing is a Corona decal in our scene. So to bring that in, we're just going to go under the Corona menu up here, and we're going to bring in a Corona decal. Then we just take this material, we apply it to the Corona decal, and we have our Corona decal happening. Now it is looking rather small, so what we can do is we can resize it, right? If we so want to. We can move it into the position. The interactive render is going to update. We can project it onto other surfaces as well. Right now it's on the pavement. Maybe that's not the best idea. So let's move it back on the road. And that's the general workflow right there, right? Right. Now, as we demoed in 3ds Max, if you go under the Corona Decals properties, you do want to play with the size a little bit to make sure that the aspect ratio is set correctly. In Cinema 4D, you have this fit to bitmap command here. If you then select a bitmap that you're using in your material that you're applying to the Corona decal, then that aspect ratio is going to get, properly set for your Corona decal so that you don't have squashed decals or anything like that, right? Right, okay, so let's take a look at some of the additional functionality as well. We're going to start on hiding some of the other decals in our scene. So we have these yellow road markings. If you're smart, you can also use Chaos Scatter to scatter them alongside a spline. So decals work with Chaos Scatter as well. We're going to unhide the manhole cover here as well. As you can see, that one's looking rather nice as well. And then let's unhide this pretty nasty looking pothole here as well. It's pretty nasty looking, people might get injured if they drive over them. And that is because, or step over them, because we're on a pavement. Cars don't drive on the pavement. So as you can see, this pothole, this material actually has displacement on it. And that's, if we just get a little bit closer, that's why this hole is actually etched into the pavement. So it's actually a literal hole in the pavement, because that's what you can do with decals. So you just need a displacement map in the material that you're applying to your Corona decal, and you can create holes. So how about we create a real life hazard here? We can create this big hole here. Or, we can make it a smaller hole. So, at this point, as you can see, the workflow becomes really creative. You can just tweak things. You can position your decals any way you want to. You can make them be actual holes, or, you can move them anywhere you want to. The interactive render is going to update. And so the point here is that the workflow is supposed to be fun, intuitive, and really easy to use, and you can really quickly prop your scenes with decals. Can you do the same things in Cinema 4D? Well, you most certainly can. So we're going to expand our existing Corona decals null here. We have, as you'll notice, we have some Corona decals nested or being cloned using a Cinema 4D cloner. So yes, you can use decals with a Cinema 4D cloner. They work just fine like that. And so, you can use them. You can use decals with the Chaos Scattering system. You can use them with the cloner. It'll work. It'll work, okay? And then let's start on hiding some of the additional decals in our scene as well, just like we did in the 3ds Max demo. So we got the manhole cover, we got some extra, cracks in the floor and such. Then we also have this big pothole that we also had there in 3ds Max. As you can see, this is a real indent into that pavement. So that's really important to note, right? If we bring up this material, well, you're going to see that it's set up exactly the same as it was in 3ds Max. We got that albedo texture, we got the roughness texture, we got the normal map, and then we also have that very important displacement map, which is, driving that that displacement essentially, right? So what if we make this hole a really large hole? So if we do that, you can see we can create a real life hazard right there. Or, we can just make it be a little bit smaller. But the point is here, there's no limitations. You can just go nuts with these. And you can create holes, indents. You can create things that are sticking out and such. And all of that is just designed to work with decals. Okay, so how about some additional Corona decal functionality? So we are back in 3ds Max here. And what we are going to do is we're going to unhide a bit of a, you know, a crack in the whole decal here, if you will. Okay. Now, as you can see, this crack is being applied on top of that lane marking, and it's sort of cutting it in half, as you can see, right? The lane marking is being cut in a way, right? It's not, well, the reason here why is that is happening is because layering is how decals work. So if you have a decal above another decal, it's going to be applied on top of it. If you move that decal below the other one, well, then as you can see in this case, we moved that cracked road decal below the lane marking, and now the lane marking is getting applied on top of that cracked road decal. And so layering with decals can be done like that. So you can have decals that are sitting on top of each other, and the order in that case will matter. Okay. Okay, so then let's unhide a couple of, well, let's unhide this really big pothole around the manhole cover. As you can see, it's a big one. Okay, it's really, they should fix that up. But if we get closer, you're going to see that the pothole here has actual displacement to it, but the manhole cover, you know, so the pothole has its own displacement, but the manhole cover is not being affected by it, as you can see, right? The manhole cover has its own displacement. Okay, so that is happening because if we take a look at the manhole cover's properties, you're going to see that these parameters here, replace base displacement and replace base bump, are active. And so the decal that has this enabled and is sitting on top is just going to replace all the displacement and the bumping that's going to happen below it. Okay, so if we disable it, you're going to see that now that pothole is going to be affecting the manhole's displacement as well, right? And when you don't want that to be happening, well, all you have to do is you just need to toggle the replace base displacement parameter back to on. And it's that straightforward to use, really. Now, if we're going to jump back into Cinema 4D here, and we're going to demo that same workflow in here as well. Okay, so because all of what we just showcased is holds true for the C4D implementation as well. So as you can see, we have that crack in the floor there, and the lane marking is now being sort of split, right? And if we move the decal, the cracked floor decal, the cracked road decal, if we move it below the lane marking, well, now you're going to see that the lane marking is essentially what we're saying here is it's going to get applied on top of that cracked road decal. Okay, if we get a little bit closer to it, well, you're going to notice that the displacement is still there, but, you know, it's just that the road marking is going to get applied on top of that cracked road decal. Okay, so layering is important if you're after those kind of effects, but it's all designed to be really easy to use. Now, if we download the same thing as we did in 3ds Max, so with this pothole around the manhole cover, well, you can see that the manhole cover has its own displacement, right? It's not being bothered by the underlying displacement. That is because, well, the manhole cover decal has its replace base displacement parameter and replace base bump parameter turned on. Okay, so exactly the same functionality we talked about or that we showcased in the 3ds Max demo holds true in Cinema 4D as well. Now, let's take a look at some of the things you can create with decals. Here's a car that has, we're not going to say which car, but it's a car. It has these sort of stripes across it, right? And as you can see, you know, they're not going over the windows. All right, the windows are not don't have those stripes over being painted over them. That's because decals also have include and exclude functionality, so you can set which parts of the mesh or which objects the decal is affecting. So that's important to note. How this scene was set up? Well, it was done in C4D, and it was as simple as this. We created two really long and narrow decals. We applied some basic materials to them. We define the include, excludes parts of the car, and that's it. Now, are you a 3ds Max user? Well, we created a very similar scene in 3ds Max as well. So as you can see, right, it's another car with stripes, and this is how it was created. So we just, took those decals, we projected them onto the car, defined the include and exclude areas, and that's it. Now, here's a bit of an artistic scene that we've created, in this case, in Cinema 4D. So these footprints, as you can see, they're really indented into the ground, and the ground itself has displacement. You can clearly see those rocks, right? They're kind of sticking out. So these footsteps were Corona decals. And, we're showing how we created this in Cinema 4D. You can create that same effect in 3ds Max as well. This is a scene we created, well, this time in 3ds Max. So what are Corona decals here? Well, it's the raindrops. So we just took an opacity map that looked like raindrops. We applied it to a water-like material. We also took that same opacity map and we plugged it into the bump slot as well to create those nice sort of, reflections, if you will, because raindrops kind of are sticking out. So we're applying a bump to them. We could have applied displacement to them as well. Then we just applied all of that onto a decal and we projected the decal on the window. And that was it. Now, if you take this a step further, you can get these effects as well. So you can animate decals, you can have animated textures in the decals as well. And so, there's really a ton that you can do with decals. You can animate decals, you can just, the point is here, be creative with them. And please show us what you create because we're really interested in seeing. It's a really powerful system. Now, this brings us to our next topic. The decals, I think, hopefully you're excited about them, but there's more to be excited about in Release 8 because one of the big new features is also improved tone mapping, and it consists of several additions to the workflow, if you will. So the first thing is a one-click ACES filmic look. So if you're after that filmic ACES-like look, well, we got it. So here's the scene. It's a raw image, if you will. Okay. And you're going to notice that, things are blowing out. We would have to do some highlight compression, some filmic mapping or whatnot. But by default, you're going to see that now there's this thing in the tone mapping stack, if you will, which is called the ACES OT operator. So right now it's off. But if we enable it, look at that. We end up with this really nicely tone mapped filmic image. So those highlights get treated real nicely. The darker tones in the image get adjusted a little bit. And so ACES is really that, ACES OT is really that sort of, if you're after that ACES look, if you're after that filmic look like film cameras have, the ACES OT operator is probably going to be your friend. And it's really easy to use. You just turn it on or you turn it off. And there's nothing to tweak. It'll do its magic on its own. So again, before, after, huge difference. We definitely would encourage you to play around with it. Here's a couple of images that we created ourselves. So this is essentially a raw image, if you will. We apply the ACES OT operator on top of it. Look at that. Those tones, those highlights, those blacks, everything's a lot more balanced. It has that filmic look to it. Here's another scene. It's a living room scene. So again, sort of like highlights are kind of blowing out and such. Apply the ACES OT operator and boom, there we go, right? It looks a lot different, a lot more balanced, if you will. Here's a bit of a car on a backplate scenario, right? So right now the hood is blowing out, the road looks kind of weird, and the sky, we can't even, don't let me get started on the sky. We definitely need some highlight compression here as well. And we control those highlights with the ACES OT operator. We just turn it on and it'll take care of the rest. So if we do a before and after, you can see that the hood of the car, right now, when we're looking at the raw image, it's blowing out. If we switch to the ACES OT modified image, you can see that there's a lot more to it. We can see a lot more of that detail. The same holds true for the road. If you focus your attention on the lower right corner, there's a huge difference there as well. And if you take a look at the sky, this is the before image. and the after image, you can see that there's just a lot more of those natural colors in there, because the ISIS-OT operator, it does not only operate, it does not only operate on the luminance part of your image, if you will, it also will play with the colors a little bit. So with high exposures and with colors of high intensity, those are going to get affected once you turn the ISIS-OT operator on, and they're going to get affected in a way so that they're going to mimic that, what would happen if you were shooting this image with a film camera. Okay, so there's that to it. It's a really big thing, and we definitely want you to play around with it. Then the next big thing when it comes to tone mapping is the customizable tone mapping stack. So the stack for your tone mapping operators, okay, so for your LUTs, for your exposures, for your white balance, can now be customized. So how about we demo that real quickly? We're going to demo it in the Corona image editor here, just because the UI is going to always look the same in C4D and in 3ds Max. Let's first enable the ISIS-OT operator, because as you can see, that makes a huge difference right there. And now, because we're dealing with the customizable tone mapping stack, we can just hit on this little plus button here, and we're going to get a list of operators that we can put into our tone mapping stack. So in our case here, we're going to add a LUT operator. We're just going to enable it, do what you could always have done, you know, play with the opacity a little bit and such. And what we can do next here is going to be pretty big, because now, because we are dealing with a customizable tone mapping stack, we can hit the plus button again, and we can add another operator on top of it all. So we're going to add another LUT operator in this case, and we're just gonna set it to, well, let's just pick a bit of a different LUT here, and you know, now you can have multiple LUTs in there if you want. You can have multiple contrast operators in there if you so want to. This allows for some really cool workflows. So for example, you can toggle between one LUT and another, right? So you can quickly get kind of different looks going and compare how everything looks like without, you know, having to reload those LUTs in and out and such. You can just bring multiple of them in there and then just switch between them. What you can also do, this is just an idea, okay? What you can also do is you can bring in another simple exposure operator, for example. You move it up the stack, because yes, you can do that as well. And now you can set up, let's say, for example, we wanted to set up this simple exposure operator that we brought in. We disabled the previous one. We're going to set it to an exposure that's going to fit the LUT that we're using here. And so now we can switch between different LUTs that work in combination with different simple exposure operators, right? So now you can kind of toggle between the different looks real easily. And those looks are not only limited to having different LUTs in there, you can have different simple exposure operators that sort of combo with those LUTs, right? Right, and that's just an idea for a workflow that you can use with the customizable tone mapping stack. There's also presets for tone mapping now. So let's take a look at those. So it's real easy to use, okay? So all you have to do to access presets is you're gonna wanna hit that big old preset button. You see it right here. You just select it, and then you can choose from any of the presets that we've created for you internally. And you can, for example, choose the photographic filmic preset, and you have that photographic filmic look going on that we made internally for you. Okay, you want to switch to a more creative look, you can use the There Is No Spoon one. Tom created this one. You know, as with any preset, you do sometimes want to adjust the exposure a little bit to fit your scene. Maybe you want to up the contrast, and just like that, you have this very matrixy looking scene with those green tones and such. So presets can be really awesome if you want to, you know, if you want to have a place, if you want to start with, you know, a stack that was already predefined and you want to tweak it later on. Then let's talk about camera overrides, because these are really important in the new system. And so let's just jump into Cinema 4D here. As you see, we already have a scene being rendered here. And if you take a closer look at the camera that we're currently using, we're using the default Cinema 4D camera. It has no Corona camera tag applied to it, so it's not a Corona camera by any means. And if you take a look at the tone mapping stack, sorry about that, you're going to notice that we have a bit of a stack happening. And because we're not using a Corona camera or a camera with a camera that has a Corona camera tag applied to it, we're using the global tone mapping settings. Okay, those are the same settings that you can reach from the render settings. So the global settings for your tone mapping stack are the ones that are going to be applied on all your cameras that are not Corona camera tags. These are the same settings that you're going to find in the render settings. So as you can see, you have all kinds of global settings here for your camera and for your post-processing, including the basic photographic settings. But if you want to get the stack going outside the VFB, well, then you can just hit that configure tab right there. So this is going to be the same stack that you're seeing in the VFB right now, because we're looking through a default cinema 4D camera. And it's just another way of bringing up those global settings. Okay, but now here's the real important part. If you switch to camera B here, okay, you're going to see that it has a Corona camera tag applied to it. The name here, where it says tone mapping, on the right side of it, you're going to see that we have our camera listed in there. That's camera B. And that's because now we're using the stack for our camera B right here, right? So what's happening is whenever you're dealing with a Corona camera, or in other words, whenever you have a Corona camera tag applied, the stack gets saved into the tone mapping stack gets saved into that tag. So we switched to camera C here, and as you can see, camera C has a different stack. That's it's using a different tone mapping stack. So let's, for example, delete the vignette operator here, and let's switch between these cameras for a little bit. And if we go back into our camera C here, well, you're going to see that the stack updated, because again, the idea here is that the stack gets saved right into your camera tag. So whenever you have a Corona camera, so that's a camera with a Corona camera tag applied to it, the stack that you're adjusting is going to get saved into the Corona camera. You can also copy the stack from the global settings if you want to. You can also bring up the edit menu for the stack in case, if your VFB is set to display a default Cinema 4D camera that has no Corona camera tag applied to it. In 3ds Max, it's the same exact thing. So we're in our perspective view here. And as you can see, we have a bit of a stack going on. We've adjusted the exposure. We've turned ACES OT operator to on. We've got a LUT in there. So we're using basically a modified stack here. And the stack that we're using is, well, the one that's applied globally. So it's the one that you have here in the render settings, right? So if you just hit the edit tone mapping button up there, so if in the camera menu, you hit the edit tone mapping button, and now you're going to see that this is that global stack that we also have displayed in the VFB right now, because we are in the perspective camera. But if we switch to a different camera, okay, and if we take a look at its settings, well, then you're gonna be able to override the stack that this camera is using. So if you just go down into its properties, and if you expand the tone mapping rollout and you hit override, well, now you're essentially overriding the stack that's in that Corona camera. It also says there in the little name tag. And so now if you adjust this camera stack, it's gonna get saved right into that Corona camera, essentially, because you've set it to be overwritten. Now, if you're not using Corona cameras, and if you're using regular 3ds Max cameras, okay, you're going to want to apply a Corona camera modifier onto it. And as you do that, well, then it's also important to tick override to on if you want to override the stack that's being used for this camera. So in this case, that's what we did. And so this camera has its own stack. As you can see, the simple exposure is set to something different. You can also bring up the sort of little menu here for this camera stack. If in case in the VFB, you're using a different camera, you can do that. And so the workflow here, once you get used to it, it becomes really easy, and it can really allow you to customize the looks real quickly on a per camera basis. So right now we're in the perspective view. If you take a look at the stack, it's going to change as soon as we switch to to a different Corona camera. All right, and then we got to talk about photographic exposure next. So how do you, in this new system, how do you work with photographic exposure? Well, we are in 3ds Max here, and the procedure is going to be real simple. So we have the simple exposure operator in here. It's going to be in there for you by default. If you delete it, and if you hit the plus button to bring in a new operator, and you bring in the photographic exposure operator, and you just move it to the beginning of the stack, well then, in that case, the camera, which stack you're adjusting, you can just go into the settings and play with the photographic settings, and they'll work as you'd expect them to, because they're going to use the photographic exposure, right? So you can play with the f-stop, with the ISO, and so on and so forth. Fury Cinema for the user. The workflow is exactly the same. You have the simple exposure operator in there by default. Just delete it, plug in a photographic exposure operator, put it on top there, and or at the beginning of the stack, really. And then you can play around with the photographic settings in your camera. And that's all there is to the photographic exposure workflow. It's really easy to set up. And just by doing that, you're good to go. And you can do the photographic exposure magic. All right, okay. So that brings us to our first pause. And I think Tom will has been gathering your questions, and he's going to do a really, as he always does, he's going to do a really good job at trying to answer most, if not all of them. So Tom, you want to take over?
Awesome, thank you. We'll give you a chance to, rest your voice, because, oh my gosh, you have been going through so much information, and I hope everyone is finding it super useful. I have been going through the questions. I've tried to answer them directly, but because some of the questions may be things that other people are wondering about, I'm going to read out the big ones and answer them here for everybody. So we had several people ask about where Cosmos stores the assets, and can that be on a network drive? The answer is yes, it can be on a network drive. I gave them a direct link to a little help desk article on the support.chaos website, but basically, yes, you can put it on Mac drives, UNC paths, Google Drive, Dropbox even. There's a settings option in Cosmos, and that lets you define where you want it to store, which folder you want it to store those assets in. And then people are asking, can I use distributed rendering? Obviously, if you have a shared drive, then yes, every machine will be able to access that and grab the assets. And even if you don't, with things like distributed network rendering, there's a checkbox to basically send the assets across from the master machine to the slaves. So you can do that if you don't want to be using a network drive setup. But with network drive setups, you should be able to achieve any end result you desire. I had some people ask about scatter presets, but we then did show those. So there's not many there yet. We'll probably expand those in future. And as we saw, the preset contains the models that will be scattered. So, the 3 or 4 different types of grass, or the 2 or 3 different types of trees, whatever it is. And it includes the scatter with preset parameters that make sense for balancing the quantity of each of those objects. And then the only thing left for you to do is pick the distribute on object that you want the scatter to apply to, because obviously we can't give you the distribute on, that's dependent on your scene. So yeah, the scatter preset contains the scatter settings and all the models that will get scattered. I actually find that super handy. It's not hard to set up a scatter, but having a preset to get you started that brings in the models and some good settings is just making something easy even easier. I will touch on scatter for C4D. Some of you maybe, there's a couple of features that aren't in there yet, basically because it was brand new in C4D. So we focused on bringing in the big core features first, and then a couple of the newer features will be catching up soon enough to make sure that Max and C4D have feature parity. Of course, C4D, we didn't develop Corona scatter for it because most of what Corona scatter did, you could do that with the inbuilt C4D tools. Max didn't have all that kind of MoGraph and scripting and cloner functionality that C4D does, so that's why we developed scatter in the first place. But with Chaos scatter, of course, it's got so many extra features, it was time to bring it into C4D. But it's not a fast process, so we've got the core functionality in there, and very rapidly we'll add the extras. That's the surface color map and the edit instances. We had a question about the ordering of decals and whether naming has any effect. The answer is no. You can name them any way you like. The ordering is purely controlled in the 3D scene as to which one I'll say is on top. In our case, we were doing it on a flat road surface, so it is literally on top, it's height. But I mean, if you're applying it on the sides, then obviously it's which one is, you know, furthest out is the one that's on top. So it does depend on the orientation of the surface, but it's very intuitive in terms of just, you know, swapping them out in terms of which one comes first to be applied on the surface. Still on decals, there was the question whether you can bake them to be exported. The answer is not yet. I don't think that's planned. And the suggestion is, if there's anything you've seen and you think, you know what would be cool, we do have a features request section on our forums, one for Max, one for C4D. If there's anything you've seen and you think, oh, it doesn't do that yet, but it would be brilliant if it did, do please pop over there and let us know. That's where the development team will get to see it and consider it. You know, is it possible? How does it fit in with the other things that we've got planned? If you don't put it in there, it's easy for things to get lost. You know, developers are super busy, so we like to have this one place they can turn to assess the things that our users are asking for. We can't do all of them, but we do read and assess and think about all of them. So if you make a suggestion in there, it will definitely be considered. I'm not going to promise you it will get done. I'm not going to promise you when it will get done, if it does get done, but I will promise you it is thought about seriously and assessed. So yeah, anything you want to see, please pop over to our forums and let us know. On the tone mapping, can you save presets? So it's kind of a twofold answer. Clearly, any stack you set up, you can save to any folder you choose on your hard drive, which you can then get back using load. But you can't save it so it appears in the preset list. So if you come up with your own wonderful tone mapping stack that has an effect you know you're going to want to apply again and again, you can save it, but it won't appear in the presets list, but you can get it back just doing a load, and then wherever you've chosen to store your favorite presets, you can go snag it from there. Now, let me see if there's any other questions coming in. Oh, tons of them. Also, I'd like to say, you know, appreciate everybody bearing with us. It's a very long presentation because there's a lot of content here in 8, and we do want to cover it in quite a lot of detail rather than just say, oh, it's there, and not tell you how it works. So, ASIS-OT, is it just a filmic tone mapper part of an ASIS CG workflow? Yes, it's not a full ASIS workflow. We have no like OCIO compatibility for loading and saving. So you can't fit it into an ASIS pipeline. It simply allows you to apply that look to your image. Is the webinar available online? A lot of people have asked this, and I should have mentioned it at the start. Totally sorry. Yes, we're recording this, and it will be added to our YouTube. I don't know when, maybe in a couple of days, maybe early next week, because we're going to have to make sure it's good enough quality and edit it up. but it will definitely show up. So if you missed anything or you want to watch this again, yeah, it will be available to you on our YouTube. Do you have to have a displacement map applied to the material in order for override displacement to work on decals? If you override it with no displacement map, to be honest, I've never tried it. I don't know.
I think it just defaults to well, being a flat surface, I think.
Yes, I think it will override it. In other words, you'll get no displacement, even if the underlying surface had displacement. That would be my expectation. Can you add your own models to Cosmos on your local drive so you can see your 3D assets and ones in Cosmos? No, sorry. The Cosmos assets, certainly for now, are just the ones that we have curated and added to the Cosmos server. Scatter, clipping is enabled. Does this affect reflections? Yes, and that's why with clipping there's the extend option. So clipping will narrow it to only what's in the camera view, and that the example here is like a window reflecting some grass. You can extend that though, so that actually cuts it to the camera, but also a slightly wider area, so that you can still include things that will either cast a shadow into the scene from off camera, or would show up in reflections from off camera. Create our own presets in regard to vegetation. If you mean add them to Cosmos, then no. But I mean, you could, if you in terms of creating a scatter you can reuse, you could just save a scene with that, with the grass, the scatter, and then you can merge that into any future scene. So you can reuse your own scatters, but that's not, you can't add them to Cosmos sorry, I was just reading ahead of the question. You can't add them to Cosmos as a preset, sorry. Is the harp in the background real, and do I play it? Yes, it's real. Yes, I play it, but very badly. I only got it this year. Harp is a brand new instrument to me, so if you value your ears, don't ask me to play it. Any improvement in lighting? There's been no changes to the lighting this time around. Again, I'll mention the features requests. If you think there's something about the lighting that could be improved, a feature you'd like to see, do please let us know. That's important. When will Corona be able to convert Max physical materials? Don't know. Sorry. If we export a scene from C4D to Max with Decals, Caustics, will it come properly in the imported software? No, because the only way to, for now, the only way to move between Max and C4D would be something like FBX or OBJ, and of course those are industry standard, which has the advantage that anything can read them, but the disadvantage that they cannot store unique custom data, created by one piece of software, like a scatter or whatever. So at the moment, using those kind of things, no, you won't be able to move them around. I like the tone mapping. I think that isn't the correct place for exposure. Before it was better, it was possible to do animations. Again, feature requests for if you think there's some improvement that could be made. Animations, yeah, there are some problems with keyframing that we're looking into and aiming to resolve. So if that's what you're concerned about, it's causing you problems, yeah, we're already looking into seeing how that could be best addressed. If there's something else about the exposure that you think could be better, give us a holler over on the feature requests, please. Trying to scatter. How can we exclude, include, or line exclude options? Yeah, I think we showed those. You can use splines or objects, geometric polygon objects, both for include or exclude, and those can be stacks, so you're not limited to just one. So this would let you, in the same scatter, you could exclude the area around the house from grass, you could exclude a path, you could set up an include area to specifically put the grass in one place, and you can mix and match those. Most of these, we have some, quite a few tutorials out already for Curvature 8. And they're what we call how-tos, so they're kind of a quick introduction, but we will have more in-depth tutorials coming out, which we will call tutorials, where we explore things in more detail than the how-tos. But a lot of the stuff we've covered here, you'll already find a how-to on our YouTube channel. That's just youtube.com/CurvatureRenderer, and we kept the old name there for now, just so people can continue to find it. But we will have longer, more detailed ones coming out in the future. We've totally upped our game when it comes to videos. We're creating a lot more, they're a lot higher quality, we're creating them a lot faster. So keep your eyes peeled for that. There was one other question. Oh yeah, version available for 3ds Max 2023. Yes, Curvature 8 is fully compatible with 2023. For C4D, S or R26, I've seen it called both things in different places, but version 26, we do actually have a daily build of Curvature 9 that is compatible. It comes out as a daily build, so we can test it, make sure it's working. It will then come out as a hotfix for 8. So if you really just can't wait, you can grab the Curvature 9 daily build from over on the forums, and you've got compatibility with 26. Nothing else has changed, so it won't break anything. There's no new features added, so your Curvature 8 scenes will be perfectly fine in it. But if you want to be super cautious, then you know, the hotfix won't be long coming, so you'll be able to use it with version 26. And there was one more. It was any plans on Corona and Chaos Vantage compatibility? No plans to announce at the moment. Obviously, these things may or may not change as things go on in the future. We're always keeping an eye on stuff, but yeah, nothing planned at the moment. We have our roadmaps. They're just being updated now that 8 is out as to what we're thinking and doing for 9. So yeah, feel free to keep an eye on that. And I'd say that's all the questions I've spotted. We do have another Q&A right at the end. Again, you can post your questions as we go through the last part of the presentation. Or you can wait till it comes up and post them then. And if I missed your question, I'm sorry, to yell at me and let me know, and I'll try and get to it in the second half. And if you're fully refreshed, Nate, I can pass it back to you.
Oh yeah, thank you. That was really fun to listen to.
I shall switch myself off and take it away.
All right. Well, let me just say thank you everyone for all the questions. Those were some really good questions, and like Tom said, just another reminder, there's going to be another Q&A session right before the end. So how about we continue here? All right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is going to be the Corona Slicer. Now, there's a lot of people are really excited about this feature as well, and it's pretty awesome. So the Corona Slicer makes creating cutaways real easy. So here's a before, here's an after, and you can make these kind of slices to your geometry, these kind of cutaways real easily. So let's take a look at the workflow here. Let's jump into 3ds Max first, okay? And as you can see, we have this interior here that we're gonna wanna cut a little bit, right? And whenever you're dealing with the slicer material, you wanna have some sort of a base geometry in there. Any kind will do. It can be super complex, or it can be a simple box like we're using here, okay? So then, with that base geometry in there, what you wanna do is, you just wanna bring in a Corona Slicer material, and you wanna apply it to the base geometry, and just like that, you're making the cuts. And it's really, that's all you have to do. And you're already in action. If you're a Cinema 4D user, well, we have a similar scenario. We have an interior here that we want to cut through, and now we already have some sort of a base geometry ready here. It's this basic cube. Again, you can use any sort of complex geometry if you so want to. In this case, we're going to use the cube. We're going to bring in a slicer material, and we're going to apply the slicer material to our cube. And just like that, we're making the cuts. We're already making cutaways. Okay, just a couple of steps is all that's needed. But now the Corona slicer material has a bunch of options that you can play around with still. Let's take a look at the include, exclude option first here. So if you take a look at our interior, you can see that we're cutting through the curtains and the window pillars here, and that's no good. So what we're gonna do is, we're just gonna locate that geo, okay? We're gonna take those nulls and we're gonna place them into the exclude list in there. So let's do that for the windows and let's do that for the curtains as well. And just like that, you're including, well, essentially you're excluding the curtains and the windows from being cut. Okay. In 3ds Max, the procedure, the workflow is the same. It's just a different UI. So you have your include, exclude list here. We have a selection set prepared for the objects that we want to exclude here. So we're just going to select them, move them into the exclude list. And then we're going to hit OK. And just like that, we're excluding those doors and sofas and curtains from, well, being sliced. Right? So this way you can really do some complex slicing real easily. Now, if you take a look at the walls themselves, you're going to see that they're capped, okay? And that is due to this cap slice functionality here that we have, the cap. So if you disable the cap slice geometry, you're going to see that those walls won't have those caps on them anymore, okay? If you enable it, the caps are going to come back. Just like that. But then you have this override cap material here where you can plug in your own material. Or if you uncheck the override cap material slot, well, now those walls are going to use the same, those caps on the walls, for example, are going to use the same material that's applied to the walls themselves. Okay, so we're not overriding those caps. They're going to use the same material as the underlying geometry has applied to them. If you toggle override cap materials on, you can plug in your custom material in there as well. So we're going to create a new Corona physical material. We're going to give it a bit of a, blue color, just something that so that it stands out a little bit more. We're going to plug it into the override cap material slot, and just like that, our caps have that material that we just created applied to them. So you can really customize how those caps look like. And you can do that real easily by plugging a material into the override cap material slot. Now, if you are a Cinema 4D user, well, we said this before, the workflow is pretty much the same. As you can see right now, our walls are capped off. That's because we have our caps enabled. If we disable the caps, well, then in this instance, our walls here won't be capped off. Okay. Now, if we enable caps, and if we take a look at the use cap material functionality, if we disable it, well, now the caps are going to use the same material as the underlying geometry or the geometry that's being cut. Okay, and it's going to use that same material. But if you toggle use caps material to on, well, then you can plug in your own custom material in there. So we're going to do the same exact thing that we did in the 3ds Max demo. So we're going to create this really vivid looking material, and we're just going to plug it into the cap material slot. And just like that, you know, our caps are now using that same material, that material that we created a second ago, right? Right. And that's all the magic that there is to the caps functionality. It's that easy to use. Now, if we take a look at the interior itself, you're going to see that the lighting got affected by the cut that we're making. So essentially, the cut, you know, is letting more light into the room because we're cutting the room in half. Okay, now sometimes you don't want that. And what you do in those cases, you bring in a ray switcher material, okay, and then you plug the slicer into the directly visible slot inside that ray switcher material. And then you take that ray switcher material and you apply it to your base geometry that you're using for the cuts. And just like that, you're only making those cuts be, you know, affecting things visually. It's not going to change the lighting. And if you want to take this even further, you could also apply a self-illuminated material to those wall caps, and those caps would then not be so dark as they are right now. The entire thing is super interactive. So the interactive renderer is going to update, you know, if you move the base geometry around and you're kind of adjusting that cut, the interactive renderer is going to update. No problem there. And so this allows for a really creative and, well, honestly, in my opinion, fun workflow, because you don't need to wait around and hit render every time. It's all working with the interactive renderer just fine. Now in 3ds Max, much of the same holds true. So if you don't want that lighting to be affected, you want to bring in the Corona ray switcher material. You take the Corona slicer material, you plug it into the direct visible override slot there, and then you apply the ray switcher material to your base geometry, and just like that, you're not, you're just making those cuts visually. They're not going to affect the lighting rays, if you will. The entire thing is interactive, so if you move the base geometry around, you can really you know, see what kind of cuts you're making. The interactive renderer is going to update, which again allows for a fun and creative workflow. All right. Same holds true for the 3ds Max version here as well. If you want those caps to be a bit more, you know, so they're not so dark, then you want to play with the override cap material, and you want to put some self-illumination in there as well. And that's pretty much all that there is to the Corona slicer material. But with release 8, there's even more more features that we want to talk about here. So the next one on the list is the curvature shader, curvature map, depending on the DCC that you're using. So the curvature shader, what it does is it takes a look at the curvature on your mesh, and then it gives it a color that you define. So convex surfaces are going to have a certain color. In this case, they're going to be red. And as you can see on our rendered image there, on our little line, that's the case. The convex surfaces have this red color to them. Concave surfaces, we gave them a green color. Well, those concave surfaces are then going to have that green color to them. So the curvature shader is really useful if you want to just plug it into the texture, into the base layer's texture slot to drive its diffuse color, or you can use it as a utility shader. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. The important thing is, just so you remember what concave is and what convex is, because you know, that's how you'll define the surfaces with the curvature shader. And if you're wondering what the difference is between the curvature shader, the curvature map, and ambient occlusion, well, the ambient occlusion takes the occlusion into the account, the occlusion of a surface, while the curvature shader itself is just worried about the curvature of the surface. Okay. Now we mentioned that the curvature shader can be used as a utility shader of sorts. So in this case we have a layered material going on. The base material is this weathered green material, right? And then we have a gold material that's sort of coming through on those convex surfaces. And we're using the curvature shader. If you take a look at the node tree there, we're using the curvature shader as a mask, right? So that's why it's a utility shader, a really good utility shader in this case, right? So now you can create these kinds of effects that you see right here real easily. If you're a 3ds Max user, well, the curvature shader looks exactly the same, or it works exactly the same for you as well. So you have that convex color that you can tweak, the concave color, and there's that base color as well. So for all the surfaces that are in between, I don't think we mentioned that in the C4D demo there. There's also that base color parameter, okay? And that's going to be those surfaces that are in between, if you will, between being convex and concave. And again, the most important thing here, I guess, is to remember just what is concave and what is convex. Because if you don't know what is convex and concave, you're going to have a bit of a harder time playing with this effect. But, you know, just you can always fire up the interactive renderer and just play around with it, and you'll get results like that. Then obviously you can do the same thing as we demoed in the C4D demo. So we have a layered material here. We're using a weathered material for the base, a gold material that we're applying on top, but only on the surfaces that are convex. And we're defining those convex surfaces with the help of the Corona curvature shader. So creating these types of, for example, metal materials that you see here that are sort of weathered and such, it becomes real easy. And that's the curvature shader, or map, depending on how you want to, which DCC you're working with. Next up, we have the Cryptomatte support to announce. So we now support Cryptomattes, and the idea is that we're just supporting that Cryptomatte format. So if you're using, for example, Nuke, you can leverage the Cryptomatte support. If you're using Photoshop or any of the other post-production tools, you might have to resort to plugins to get Cryptomatte to working. But you know, we now support this industry standard, if you will. Why is Cryptomatte useful? Well, here's a bit of an example. We have this bedroom scene here, and as you can see, there's a lot of depth of field happening, and the background is really kind of blurry there. And in this case, if you wanted in post-production change the color of that back wall, with Cryptomatte, you can really easily do that and not get that fringing that happens with regular mattes. Okay, so here's an example. You can see that we've used Cryptomatte to separate that back wall there. And because Cryptomatte is good with motion blur and it's so good with depth of field, you know, we can really easily fine tune, for example, in this case, that back wall there, even though it's all blurry and there's a lot of depth of field happening and such. So Cryptomatte is good with that kind of stuff. We plan on having tutorials in the future on this topic that will hopefully, you know, will hopefully help you understand how Cryptomatte works. So keep an eye out for those tutorials. Bottom line is, we now support Cryptomatte. If you know what it's for, you can now use it. Then we have a list of additional improvements here, and we're just going to go over them a little bit more quicker, but they are really useful. So the first thing on the list here is Include, Exclude Caustics. With this functionality, you can now set whether an object receives generated caustics. Okay, so here's an example in front of you. If you take a look at the caustics that are forming on the chairs and are coming from the glasses, right? You're going to see that the chair on the right is receiving caustics. The chair on the left, no caustics right there. That's a bit of a not so apparent example. So let's take a look at another example. So this is a bit of a production scene that we had going. And so if you take a look at, for example, the upper left corner there, you're going to see that the caustics are kind of casting this pattern on that wood, and it kind of looks like this strange texture, I guess. It's perfectly physically realistic, right? But it might look strange to some. Then if you take a look at the upper right corner, you can see that the caustics are definitely there, but they're not adding much to it. They're not that visible, right? And they kind of look like they're part of the concrete pattern. And if you take a look at the that back wall in that interior there, you're going to see that we have some fireflies happening. Well, with the Include, Exclude functionality, what we can do is we can set only certain objects to be receiving caustics or displaying caustics. Or if we turn that around, we can exclude objects from receiving caustics. So in this case, we're going to take all these elements that we just talked about, and we're going to exclude them from receiving caustics. And this is then the end result. Now, the idea here is that obviously, you know, you can use this as sort of an art directable thing. So if you don't like patterns in the upper left corner, well, you can just exclude that object from receiving caustics, right? The pool's still going to have caustics. That's really important, probably for this image. But, you know, those other parts are not going to have them. Now, there's one really important thing that we do need to mention here is that the include functionality, with it, if you're going to exclude a lot of stuff, you might see some slight performance improvements, but that's not the intent of this functionality. Okay, it's the icing on the cake. So you're not going to get big performance speedups. This is more just about excluding certain areas where you don't need caustics, or areas like that back wall there where caustics that are not contributing a lot to the visually to your scene. Well, those can now be excluded, right? So that's how this tool is designed to work. Okay, so then we got another additional improvement, and that is the base tail parameter. This parameter is in there in the Corona physical material, and it lets you blur highlights without blurring other reflections in the same manner as roughness does. So what you're doing here is you're essentially setting the width of that base tail on your image. So you have a bit of a GIF or GIF, depending what kind of a person you are. You can see you can see how this metal material here changes when we up the tail's blurriness. Okay, it's different than roughness, and if you want, you can experiment with it. You can get some really nice results with it. And it does not only work for reflections, it also works for refractions here, as you'll see, as we're gonna up the tail, things are gonna get blurrier, but it's not the same as roughness. Again, it's just about blurring that tail that's there, okay? Okay, then we also have layered displacement. This basically means that with the layered material, you can now control how displacement from multiple material layers are combined. So you've got an option to just have the base displacement, you can blend the two displacements, or you can add displacements on top of each other. So this is relevant for your layered materials here, and it's been requested, and we listened and we implemented it. Then we also have Tyflow Support. We've added support for this very popular and robust simulation plugin, so there's support for that as well. And that brings us to our last and final Q&A. Tom?
It's me again. Awesome. We've kept everybody quite a long time. There aren't many questions this time around, so that's probably good because we don't want to take up your entire day. I appreciate you all staying while we cover everything. We got a question about changing the height of the slice. And yes, you can just move the slice or object anywhere you like, and it will cut through the object at that point. I mean, and then the example scene of our house, if you could even make that a thin cube, and then of course it would actually cut just, you'd have the ceiling and the top of the wall, then you'd have a gap, then you'd have the bottom. So your slicer geometry can be any geometry you like. We used a simple cube, but you could use, text or anything you want as a slicer. And you don't get into all the ugly problems that you get using Booleans. It actually becomes real fun to slice things up, whereas with Booleans it was kind of a living nightmare. Anyway, the slicer was awesome, and like I say, any geometry you like, and then you can just control the position of the slice by moving that geometry around. We also have the question about the background behind the slicer, and I think I understood the question, but I could be wrong. But basically, yeah, when you slice the object away, there's no special slicer background. It's just whatever you have as a background for the scene. You will see it through the slice just as if the geometry wasn't there. In our case, we just had a plain white background, but I mean, it could have been a back plate of some sort, and you can see the back plate where the slice has happened. I'm not going to get into GIF or GIF. That's just going to start a conversation we don't want to have. Let's see, a couple of other questions come in. Motion blur functioning for Tyflow. Yes, it is. Will we update Corona Academy with Corona 8 new features? Corona Academy, you'll have to wait for news on that. There's going to be some big changes there. An awesome webinar. Why, thank you. How to use two Corona versions 7 and 8 simultaneously and switch between them. That really hasn't changed. The instructions for installing and using different versions still apply. We have the multi-loader for Macs. And yeah, basically you can set it up so if you run this little bat script version, you get Macs with Corona 7. This is how I do it. The old version is a script, and the current version is if I just run Macs by default, I get the new version. And there are ways of doing the same thing for C4D too. So if you want to have 7 and 8 installed at the same time, you can do that. Yes. Datasmith compatibility, no news on that. Sorry. Again, that would be one. Hop onto the forums and feature request it to keep that topic alive. If it's something that's important, let us know that. And that actually covers all the questions. And as I said, we have run over a little bit. Appreciate everyone staying with us. A lot of people have still stayed here. Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed it. You know where to reach us if you have questions that you think later on you suddenly go, oh, I forgot to ask. You know where we are, and we're always happy to answer your questions. So popping over to our forums, you can reach us, you know, on our Facebook page and stuff too. But the forums are best. Anything serious, please use support.chaos.com, submit a request to contact the support team directly. And that's it. Nate, would you like to say your farewell too? He's probably still having a drink of water.
I'm here.
Probably passed out from exhaustion.
Yeah, I mean, as you noted, Tom, this has been a bit of a long-winded webinar. We are super thankful for all of you that stayed here and for all of you that are going to watch this webinar when it's going to be uploaded to all the platforms. The thing is that it's been a long webinar because honestly, there's so many new things, as you've probably seen. And this was a webinar focused on just the big, shiny features. At the end there, we kind of try to speed things up a little bit for those slightly minor big features. But there's also a lot more that's still in there. And we hope you're going to enjoy it. It's been really, we focused this release on making your everyday workflow a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot more straightforward. We wanted to make it, so that you enjoy using the software even more so than you previously did. And kudos to the development team, to everyone involved in making all of this stuff happen. Hopefully you can see that there's been a ton of work being put into this. So that's sort of my thank you to everyone involved from my side.
I think you have a final thank you slide, and that's it. We are done. So appreciate you all coming along. Oh, there he is, the man himself. Give him a round of applause. I think he did an awesome job. That was a lot of stuff to cover.
It was a lot of stuff to cover, but that's what happens when you have a lot of features. We just hope that you're going to enjoy them, and that hopefully this webinar made things a little bit more clear for you. And sorry for not having the webcam earlier in the intro. We had some technical difficulties.
So we got to have some in any sort of live presentation. I mean, it just wouldn't be right if everything went totally according to plan.
Oh, no.
Excellent. Well, we'll see you all for the Corona 9 webinar. Take care, everybody, and enjoy Corona 8.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.